What's up, everybody? Welcome to year 3 of the lab. We're at 151 of Omnic Lab. My name's Rob, coming in all the way from a late Friday night in Japan. We are back with another strategy guide for you. For those of you who are new here, this is a podcast that focuses on the strategies inside of the game of Overwatch. We kind of use trial and error in a lab-like format where we kind of learn with our guests and try to break down the strats and tips in to stir it in to the mixture and sometimes get those strategic edges. Joining me, as always, is my co-host all the way from Georgia. We have Andres Gomez. What's up, Andres?
Hey, what's up? What's up? Struggling with audio difficulties this morning, but I'm glad we got through them, and now we're smooth sailing into the going deep.
We're also back to the shows without voice cracks at 0 now, as of last week, because I was super sick, so I'm feeling much better this week. And also super excited because this week, we're going back to our roots. We're going to go deep yet again after a long drought, and we're going to have a special guest, top 500 player Yeatle, rolling in to set up a minefield of information for us about Wrecking Ball today. Welcome to the show, Yeatle. What's up?
Hey, what's up, everyone? You guys know me as #1 baller, formerly top 500 off-tank player, and I'm just a guy that rolls people on ladder.
Feels
Perfect.
Good, man.
You're the guy for the job.
So before we get into anything today, let's just get to know our guests a little bit before we jump into some announcements and then the guide itself. So Yeatle, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what kind of stream you like to run, maybe a little bit of your gaming background, what brought you to Overwatch, and then how you transitioned from hero to hero before Ball came out. And tell us about that.
Yeah, I started off at console like everyone did, playing Halo back in the days, good stuff. Then Overwatch came out, played a little bit of that, and made the swap to PC, played some off-tank. I got really good at that, and then Wrecking Ball came out, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be the next off-tank hero, and let me get good at that. And here I am today, off-tank Wrecking Ball. Not really an off-tank, but you know how it is.
Sure. How long have you been at your stream?
We've been at it for like, I think last December. Yeah, about last December. No, we just passed December.
So December 2017?
It's been more than the year. Sorry, debated. More than the year for sure. 2017. Yeah.
So 2017 December.
So like a year and a half so far.
All right.
Exactly.
So pretty recent though.
Yeah. Been a bit.
You're back into, now that you've been doing it for a year, you've got a pretty consistent schedule going. Why don't you let people know like your typical schedule so they can find you?
My schedule is kind of weird, but as of this month, I'm streaming like every day from 11 East to 7 East. So 8 hours a day every day for the month.
Nice. That's quite the commitment for a month. That's a
Big
long
ride.
stretch. So if you guys want to catch some Yeatle playing Ball or even other off tanks as his specialty, as well as other stuff that I'm sure you're bound to see on his stream, you can check him out at, I believe it's Yeatle_Overwatch, or is that your Twitter?
Oh,
tag?
that's my Twitter. On Twitch, It's twitch.tv/Yeatle. Just Yeatle.
Right on. Okay, Andres, let's get through some info for the month of May, now that we're getting close to our next game night, and our sponsorships, and we will run back to the Going Deep episode.
Sounds good. As always, guys, remember at the end of the month, last Friday, this time is May 31st. Game night's coming around the corner. It's a great time to hang out if you guys want to have other people to six-stack with and go against each other for funsies. It's a great place to do it. We have a blast every time that we do game nights with Rob. We get to meet you guys, the listeners, and you guys get to beat on us a little bit and flex a little bit on the podcasters over here. But it's always a great time. So if you guys are looking for a group to play, make sure you're here on August 31st. You join the Discord. Everything happens through the Discord. You can join it through Omnic Lab, that Discord. Or what's the address, Rob, for Discord?
It would be discord.me/Omnic Lab. That will generate a link in your browser for you, or you can just find the link on our website.
Yep, we got the link posted everywhere. You can even find it in the episode description.
Should even be on Twitter too, like just all the descriptions. Just Google Omnic Lab Discord. You'll be the first result. You'll find it.
Mm-hmm. As always, thank you to Top Score Solutions for being a sponsor of the show. Great esports community. If you guys are looking to join an esports community of any sort, whether you do journalism, whether you do streaming, whether you just game, or want to become part of an organization, they're doing a lot of work over there to kind of like find you a place. Also, Omnic Meta, all of the stats that you need for Overwatch, you can find them on this website. Personal stats, Overwatch League stats. You want to know what's the latest trends going around? Switch does a great job dissecting the meta through stats for you. So check it out, omnicmeta.com.
One of the most approachable devs around because you can jump on our Discord and talk to him as a person. You don't have to like submit little tickets and stuff. You can get access to a special channel and talk to the dev directly. That being said, let's kick it back to Yeatle. We're going to talk all about Wrecking Ball and the hero breakdown. But before we really get into the nitty gritty, the first thing is always first, basics. So let's talk about fundamentals of Wrecking Ball. And I'm just going to kick it to you. You have free reign to start wherever you like.
Okay, so basically with Wrecking Ball, you got two major playstyles. You're either an engager or a disruptor, right? So if you're disrupting, that means like, let's say the enemy team has a bunker set up on high ground, and you're going in, you're knocking them off, you're disrupting, you're messing with the enemy tanks, putting them out of position. That way your DPS can like land their shots because there's no shield to shoot at anymore when they're not behind it. And if you're not disrupting, you're engaging. So that's basically just diving. You go in with your team, call out, "Hey, let's all just dive this Ana back there." You and the team all go in, just engaging, going in. That's basically the nitty gritty of Wrecking Ball. Disrupting could be more stuff like maybe even stalling the payload, contesting the payload to bring some resources in, just stuff like that. And that's basically your job.
So Wrecking Ball is such an interesting hero, and you mentioned this in the beginning because you said that you were an off tank player, and when Wrecking Ball kind of came out, you were like, "Oh, next off tank," right? And a lot of people thought the same. I was one of those people too. But the more that time goes on, more people realize, hey, you can use Wrecking Ball as a main tank, but it's a very off-speed main tank, right? You don't main tank with him like you do with Reinhardt or you do with Winston. And you just mentioned that you can use him as a disruptor or a dive hero. But how can Wrecking Ball fill that main tank role if he doesn't have a shield or he doesn't have a bubble kind of like Winston does?
So usually when Winston does his main tanking stuff, it's he goes in with the bubble and he takes the punches for your team. So the shield will take the punches and he'll take the punches. Well, it's kind of like that for Wrecking Ball. When he goes in, he takes the punches because he has this ability called Adaptive Shield, which basically gives you more health, and you just get a ton of health when you go in on the enemy team. So you're taking all the stuns, the shield bash, the sleeps, all that, so your team doesn't have to. And that's kind of what a main tank does for the most part. They block all those cooldowns and whatnot.
Right, Wrecking Man kind of demands the enemy team to kind of focus him a little bit, kind of buying time for your teammates then to do kind of whatever they want. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? How you approach going in and getting your adaptive shields, getting the attention of the enemy?
So a lot of it is kind of like testing the waters, because when you go in, sometimes you'll get completely destroyed, or you'll go in and you'll be perfectly fine. You'll come out with like 1,000 HP because of your shield. So the best way to go about it, how I always like to dive in, is you grapple high, you swing up, and you just go in for the pile driver. If that doesn't work, then the alternative is, like I said earlier, you go disrupt, knock them around and whatnot. And in that process, the enemy team is just trying to get their stuff together. They're trying to find out what's happening. They're all like, they're confused because of that. And that makes a lot of space for your team because they're trying to get together while your team knows exactly what's happening.
Now, when you approach a style selection, these things aren't necessarily I would say that you're not giving the impression that you can't play both styles interchangeably, meaning that like when you say that you can play Zarya, for example, in a couple different styles of super aggressive, or you can play it very safe, or you can play it more of like a peel style, similar to how D.Va can be played. You can be played more bruiser, you can be played more passive, protector, and then you can even be played just like as a dive hero in a completely different format, depending on what the team wants to accomplish, right? With Wrecking Ball, these two type of styles can be used frequently in the same game, right?
For sure.
So that being said, how do you approach choosing a style just based from sitting on like what your team is doing. So you're observing your own team, and then even just observing what your team's hero picks are. How do you decide? What are some big indications for you to
So
choose that style?
So a lot of it you'll just pick up from like experience in playing and like knowing, oh, my team does this. This is what usually works when I do this. So let's say if your
Sure.
team's fully dive, like say you got a Genji, you got a Tracer, you got a Diva, you got all this stuff that can dive with you, then you'll know right away. Okay, the basis of our comp is we're just gonna go in, dive whatever the enemy supports are, and that should win us the fight naturally. But let's say you
Okay.
don't have a dive unit, then that's when you start moving more to the disruptor play style because like I said earlier, the whole point of the disruptor play style is you want to either pull resources to point, making for easy shots for your team to like gang up. Let's say a diva comes to point with you, right? That means your widow can shoot the diva that's on point while you're shooting them. Like you can team up on people. Or alternatively, so we're still imagining that we have like Widow and Hanzo or something like that. If you go ahead and disrupt them and knock them from behind the shield, then your team can like shoot whoever's not behind the shield anymore. So it's all about like what your team comp thrives at. So snipers thrive at not shooting at shields, and dive
Sure.
heroes thrive at diving.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that when people ask me about Hammond or when I usually give advice about Hammond, I usually tell people
Hmm.
to kind of avoid the front line, right? Like you're not a frontline hero like Reinhardt is. You usually don't want to take the battle up to him and just do like a one, not a 1v1, but kind of like try to win that ground on him because he has the advantage there. A lot of the times, what I like with Hammond, and maybe you can speak to this, is dictating the fight on my own terms, right? If the enemy is holding some high ground and stuff, with Hammond it's really easy to just bypass them, right? Like go right through the choke, ignore them, and maybe go to the point where now they have to come meet you on your terms, right? Um,
Yeah, for sure.
what do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like one example that makes me think of is like Eichenwald first point. I'm attacking on Ham, and then the enemy teams like to hold close to that bridge. What I like
Mm-hmm.
to do is just immediately go to left and go to point. That way, the enemy team just needs to
Right.
completely turn their back to the choke, run the point to try to contest, and it opens up a lot of space for your team because now you're fighting on your terms, surrounding the enemy.
Yeah,
Hmm.
then like I love Hammond in maps that have hard chokes like that one. So I love playing him in Paris, for example, where the enemy team is holding high ground in that little tiny choke and you have to go through it.
Mhm.
You can kind of do the same thing, right? Just bypass him, go straight to the point, and now at least somebody has to come contest you, right? So at least that's one less person, and usually it's more than that that kind of lose that high ground advantage, right?
For sure. Like especially like in lower ranks, usually when somebody gets on point, the whole team's like, "Oh, whoa, we can't see nine, we got to go to point." So you'll get like
Yeah.
three people running back for you, which is great. So
Yeah, and now
yeah,
you
And you're so
basically
fast you could just get out.
yeah,
yeah.
without taking like a damage.
So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about that because again, you don't want to take a fight head on with Hammond most of the time. You kind of want to just be rolling around most of the time. Do you want to talk about how maybe you abuse some of his mobility to get around the map, or maybe we can get into more specifics with grappling hooks
Right.
since that's such a main part of his kit?
hmm So for like example, like on Paris, like you said, you just run the point. That's a good one. And then when they do come to point, you've got a bunch of options for how you want to like. You can just boop them off high ground. You can use your mobility to like you can either run from them as they're coming towards you, or you can like hide behind them, and then when they do set up, knock them off. That's like one of the options that you have there, which usually sets you guys up pretty well. Hmm. Sorry, can you expand on the question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, let's talk about the grappling hook specifically, because there's many ways to use the grappling hook, right? Like I've seen you actually use it to get a ton of air and go through like places that maybe are not as easily spottable, right? Like you catch the
Mhm.
team off guard, but sometimes you use it like a lot more in an easier sense, right? Like you don't try to get like crazy air, but you just like throw it in front of you to just get the speed and go super fast through a point, right?
Yeah, okay, I get you now. So yeah, you can just like call it the quick grapple. It's when you just grapple to a nearby building just to get to like the fireball, right? The fireball
Okay.
stage, which does 50 damage. So I use that a lot for like 1v1s. If I have to reload, I just pull out the quick grapple real quick, get the 50 damage in, and you reload in ball form, and you can just
And
finish them off
that's
from there.
and that's actually huge. Let's explain that a little bit for maybe some of the people that don't play Hammond as much. But when you're rolling just normally as the ball, you roll pretty fast, but you
Mm,
don't knock people back and you don't do any damage as you pass by them. If you
yeah.
get any little bit of speed with your grapple hook, eventually, as you're rolling, your ball becomes kind of like the fiery ball, and that's the good stage. That's where you want to be with Hammond. If I'm sure if you're a Hammond main, you would be in fireball state all the time if you could.
Mhm.
Um, but that
Yeah.
is when you actually knock people back when you touch him, and you deal 50 damage, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, 50 damage.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a little bit of burst damage because Hammond doesn't have any burst aside from like maybe hitting a bunch of headshots in a row. So that's kind of that on your pile driver, kind of like your bursty abilities, right?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. The fireball is like what makes Wrecking Ball a Wrecking Ball. That's what makes him a Wrecking Ball because he
Mm-hmm.
does the 50 damage, he does the knocking around, and it's super fast too. So definitely an important
So
part of his kit.
when you utilize your fireball mode, I guess you could say, the 50 damage engagement, are
Mm.
you using the quick grapples so that you can get your grappling hook to escape, or are you using like, for example, if I'm going to a certain area specifically, am I
Mm.
using my grappling hook, a quick version of it on a building, just to get my fireball and retain my speed, and then by the time I get to where I want to go, my grappling hook's again up so that I can peace out? Or is there not really a rhyme or reason when you kind of use your quick grapple?
The cooldown's like really short, so you can like pretty much by the time you run out of fireball momentum, you'll
Hmm.
have it like a second later. So you can do
Okay,
what you want to do with it. You can cross the choke and get behind them, whatever, and then you'll have it again ready to roll them again. So you can be pretty
great.
generous with it.
Now I remember watching a coaching session from Jane like months ago,
Mm,
where they were doing, I believe it was a coaching session for a Genji player. And what was brought up was the Wrecking Ball was basically alongside his team, and he was basically trying to make the gatekeeper of the Grandmaster 4K wall. He couldn't break it in a Master's level. So
uh-huh.
38 heart. Basically, he said, "I'm 3,800 heart stuck." And what Jane was saying is that one of the big features that rank that kind of is your break even point is knowing when you're supposed to use your abilities anytime you see heroes in you know your given composition, and paying attention to allies more than enemies. And so what they were saying was basically like anytime that pile driver goes down, you're basically saving your dash for that, because the pile driver gets a huge chunk of damage. If they can combo that with the knockback and then your dash, it's just deleting stuff. So what are some other combos similar to pile driver dash from Genji, or maybe like you said earlier, if you're running with snipers, pile driver is great because you're popping them over the shield and then you can get a
Mm.
quick headshot. What are some other things that you're maybe looking for with your team?
Yeah, there's actually so much that you can do with Pod Driver. So one
Mm-hmm.
combo you can do is you can if you the enemy team doesn't have a shield, or even if they do have a shield sometimes, you can just combo Pile Driver with Diva Bomb. Like you can say, usually the Wrecking Ball is the one that calls it because he's the one that sees where the enemy's at. So I see like a bunch of enemies grouped up on point. I call the Pile Driver, Diva going in 3, 2, 1, throw your bomb, boom. And more than likely you're gonna get at least one kill with that Diva Bomb because the Pile Driver knocks them up and suspends them in the air, and easy target for the bomb. There's also like pile driver anti-nade, which super underrated. Like if you knock up a Reinhardt, you can just splash the anti-nade at his feet, and he is antied.
Yeah, I've been using that in my games lately. I've noticed that that's a really good combo. And also leading you can lead the nade with the, what's it called? The fireball mode, where you basically just set it up and right before it lands, they knock it into it. That's
Hmm.
been a lot higher skill cap, but it does happen.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of combos. Like if you do the anti-nade one with the pile driver, and then you like a Genji dashes through it, somebody's probably gonna die. Like
That's a lot of
that's a lot of
damage.
damage. Yeah,
That's
for
a lot
sure.
of damage.
For
Yeah.
sure. But yeah,
It
there's a
needs a
lot. So
flex tip.
you should always like look to combo with your teammates. Like even something like Hanzo's ultimate, dude. Like not the greatest ultimate, but if he sends it through a choke and you pile driver, they can't run away. So
I've seen
and
people running away from grabs that you just bop them into it.
mm,
I was gonna say the
Yeah,
pile driver, the knock up, it you can almost consider it a stun, right? Like a semi stun. So
yeah,
in
for
any
sure.
time that a stun would make sense, pile driver also makes sense. You don't have to do it only for the damage, but it's kind of like that repositioning that you do on the enemy hero, and a very predictable one, right? Because they go just straight
Mhm.
up in the air and then fall down straight down. So that's like a Widowmaker's dream, or a McCree dream, where you would know exactly where that hero is going to be.
Yeah, for sure. Pile driver is easily like his best ability, hands down.
How much
Now,
damage do
there's
you
one more.
do when you
Oh, go
pile
ahead.
driver down?
If you get a direct on somebody, which means like right on top of them, it gets 100 damage. The further they're away from you, it starts to fall off because it's like an AOE. So less and less. So if they're like all the way at the end, it'll probably do like 0 damage.
Kind of
But
Gotcha.
like
knock them up.
a, kind of like
Will
look at
it
it
still
like a
knock
very
up?
small version of Meteor Strike. It's
Yes,
100 to
exactly.
20. Is kind of how that goes.
Gotcha. But does it still knock up in the air when you're at the edge? Does it knock
Yeah.
less?
It knocks up the exact amount. And a matter of fact, something that a lot of people don't know is that when it does knock them up, it knocks them in an arc towards you. So if they're further away, like it'll pull them towards you.
That's
So
Yeah,
big
it's very
too.
much
Yeah.
like the Seismic Slam from Doom. He's very, very
for
like
sure.
that. It seems like they've recycled some of the Doomfist stuff and kind of recolored it for a lot of his abilities, to be honest.
360
Yeah.
seismic slam.
A lot of similarities.
All right, all right. There's one more thing about the pile driver that I'd like to touch on, which is using it from kind of a standing position, meaning that you're kind of in ball mode and then you can kind of roll up on a couple surfaces in the game, and that will get you enough air to trigger it, or maybe jumping down from a certain point, or just getting enough high ground from a couple steps can give it to you.
Mm.
And there's that slight delay where you have like the wind or the spin up, kind of like the Sonic effect,
Yeah.
where they kind of get the Sonic the Hedgehog look, and then the slam hits. I've seen some really interesting tech on that where you can kind of get a little bit higher on. It's hard to explain in audio format. I'm trying to like picture it in my head and describe it the best I can. But like when you're
Mhm.
swinging and you're trying to get to a certain high point and you run out of momentum, you can hit the pile driver and get a little bit more air, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you have a little bit of air control while you're in that spin up mode. Can you talk a little bit about how you've kind of learned to adjust to that, or maybe some good practice things that we can do and maybe a custom game on mastery for that?
Yeah, for sure. So for the longest time, I actually didn't know that pile driver, like it moves you a couple I don't know, like a meter or so in the
Okay.
direction that you're pointing. So I kind of just learned how to get the timing over time. So let's say
Okay.
grappling upwards, which you can do with pile driver, if you just barely miss like the landing on a higher ground platform, you can pile driver while looking that direction, and it'll lock you onto it, and you'll make it to the higher ground. But you got to be careful, because if you're too close to the wall, you'll end up just pile driving and hitting the wall and falling flat on your face.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's one of the things you can do. But a really important thing is the whole like looking the direction when you pile driver, because that lets you do some fancy stuff like let's say you're on a high ground with an enemy, you can jump off the high ground, do a 180, and pile driver back onto them. So like just jumping off the high ground, it triggers your ability to use pile driver. So when you're like
Oh, so
in
it's like a
air,
fake out
yeah,
in a
exactly.
sense.
So
Okay.
they won't see it coming at all. Like even in GM, I do it all the time. The enemies still don't see it coming. They're like, oh, the ball's leaving because you can't win or whatever. But yeah, you can completely just jump off the high ground, 180, pile driver back on.
Huh.
That's super strong ability and something worth learning.
And not only that, you basically can trigger your pile driver while basically staying at the same level, right?
Exactly.
You
No,
don't have
no
to use
grapple
your
needed.
grappling hook for it. You basically
you're
have to
not
trigger it at
losing any
ground
air.
level. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
No, that's
Huh.
huge.
Yeah,
I hadn't
that
I
was
hadn't
really
thought
cool.
about that. Yeah.
I'll have to try that now. I'm gonna go
Mhm.
run in the practice range tomorrow and see how that goes.
And it does take some time to get used to it. You basically have to have some distance from like the bottom of your model to the ground, and it's not a huge amount of distance. But anytime you create that distance, like you were saying, you're able to create or do the pile driver. And it does
Mhm.
come with some time there. I'm not that very good at the pile driver, but do you have any tips on? Did you practice pile driver in a certain ways, or you just play the hero a lot?
No, I just played them a lot. I don't think like hopping into custom games and practicing for hours on hours is really worth the time. I think getting right into the heart of the game and playing the game how it should be will get you going and learning faster. I think maybe for newer
It's
players, it's worth hopping in custom game for like an hour to kind of learn the basics. But other than
hmm
that,
Mm-hmm.
just go right at it.
You like training
yeah,
right at the core.
Yeah,
for sure,
exactly.
for sure. Okay, let's talk about using your primary fire and like when to pop in and out of the ball. This is one of the more unintuitive things I would say that people have kind of asked us about, besides of course the grappling hook, which is the number one most questioned thing that we got on our Twitterverse, as well as the podcast questions, the Discord. And most of them are things that we kind of addressed here, but some of the questions are not things that we can really talk through in
Mhm.
a audio only format, because they're asking about where should you grapple and what should you hit and how do you retain momentum. And it's like, well, a lot of those are going to be guides and stuff that you're going to want to tune into Yeatle's stream and kind of observe and watch. And then also, like we were saying, using your time in the game wisely when you're playing in ranked games to do these things in real
Mhm.
time. So let's talk about quad cannons, because this is something we can actually kind of talk about when and where you're going to want to pop in and out to use your damage.
For sure. So his primary fire quad cannons, it's kind of like Soldier 76's primary fire. It's hit scan. You can take a duel with a Pharah if you close in that distance. It's really good for that. But it's worth noting that his spread is atrocious. So be careful for those long ranges. You want to tap fire at one point or another when it spread gets really bad. That's why I have show accuracy on. A lot of players don't. But just specifically for Hammond, I have to have show accuracy on because the recoil is really bad. Um,
Mm.
but he also doesn't have a lot of ammo, so every shot counts. If not, you're gonna find yourself like trying to shoot people and having to reload a lot. So you got to be very careful about tap firing and whatnot. Let me think. Oh, a really important thing is when reloading. So when reloading, you want to go into ball form as often as you can, especially if you're taking a 1v1 against, say, like, let's say you're 1v1ing the McCree. It's better to go into ball form and like roll around him than it is to just AD strafe and shoot at him. Because when you're in ball form, you reload at the same time and speed as you would normally, which a lot of people don't know that. So there's no reason not to just like roll around and get a faster AD strafe in there. And also, you don't
And
have
you're
to
immune to
click once.
headshots.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a super important one. And yeah, that's the main points, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a super important fact about Hammond that not a lot of people abuse, especially at the lower ranks. You reload while you're in ball form. So as soon as you run out of ammo, it makes sense to just go back into your ball where you're less vulnerable to attacks. You move faster, and then you have access to your grappling hook again, so you can go into fiery mode, or you can do pile drivers and stuff if you can.
Hmm.
And then once you're reloaded back in, you can come back out with your cannons again. And it's a huge part of like high Hammond played, right? Like you're usually almost never reloading close to an enemy.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like super important for you to always not just normally reload because you have that time to reposition his ball form. Like you're super fast, and also you can chain combo while you're reloading. You can just quick grapple and roll the enemy, and you're still reloading. So it's like to get maximum DPS out, like you shoot, you have to reload, go in ball form, roll them, and while
Get
you're
50
rolling them, you're
damage.
reloading. Yeah, it's free 50 damage, so there's no reason not to do it. But a big thing is just like always being able to reposition while you're reloading. So you should do
Mm.
it when you can because yeah, it's just super important.
So the real question I have for you is, when do you quick melee in that scenario?
I usually quick melee if it's like one or two melees away from killing the enemy. That's the
Okay, so
general rule of
finishers.
exactly, yeah. Or if they're not gonna get
Okay.
healed or anything like that, just finishers most of the time.
Let's talk about his optimal range because you did say that he has a pretty big spread. So usually when you're approaching heroes, what's kind of like the distance you're trying to keep from them when you're firing?
So the best is like a little bit more the medium range than close range because the issue is if they're too close range, one, it gets a little bit harder to track the shots if they decide the AD strafe you, and two, because it'll be harder to like if you want to use your if you want to roll through them or pile driver them, it's going to be hard if they're right in front of you and body blocking. Like you want to get that distance, that way you can grapple towards them rather than grapple in them. You won't be able to do
you need
anything.
that wind up too for your grapple, don't you?
Yeah,
Get the
yeah,
space
for sure.
going.
For
Yeah,
sure.
that makes sense. Yeah, at least enough space that if you want to quick grapple them, you can.
All right. My next question is going to go back actually to the adaptive shields. The adaptive shields is such a critical survival tool as well as an engagement tool and disruption asset. So let's talk about timing, because I feel like this ability is up so incredibly often that you're basically hitting it nearly on cooldown, but the timing is very, very important with how much of the shields you can gain.
So generally, when I go for it, there's two scenarios: when you're going to engage the team or when you're going to take a 1v1. So when I engage a team, you want to like land smack in the middle or around them to get as much shield as you can. And I think that kind of explains itself. You just get as much shields as you can from that. But the important thing is don't go in if you don't have your shields. A lot of people, like, they think they have their shields and they'll go in again, making like a risky 1v6 pile driver, and they'll end up naked with no shields and just get burned. So it's really important to keep track of it. I think it's like 11 or 12-second cooldown, something like that. So it's enough time for you to go in, get out, wait a couple seconds, maybe shoot in your downtime, then go back in. And then the other time is when you're taking a 1v1. And the reason why I say do it when you're 1v1ing is for two reasons. One, it doesn't feed ult charge, which a lot of people don't know. That's super important. That's why Hammond doesn't feed if you play him right. Doesn't feed ult charge with his shield. And two, because the extra health. You get 100 per hero within range, and it counts yourself, so you get 100, 200. If you're 1v1ing 200 extra health, you'll have 800 in your 1v1. I think that's enough to win it or scare them off. So... and you don't feed them ult, so that's the important part.
You know, that's huge. And actually, now that you mentioned that, I was one of those people that didn't know that. It makes a ton of sense, because when you have a Hammond that's still kind of like rolling through the enemy, it doesn't feel like they're getting like their ultimate super fast or anything. Not unlike a Roadhog, right? Like you get a Roadhog running around in like the middle of nowhere, and people just build their ults in no time with him. But yeah, with Hammond, like a good Hammond at least, that doesn't happen that often. I hadn't put two and two together. So
now,
yeah,
I could be wrong on this, but maybe it's because that's how it's coded for temporary shields, because you have the temporary armor and permanent armor, or like regainable armor, and then you have temporary shields and regainable shields, right?
No, yeah, you're right.
So that would mean that Doomfist has this,
Lucio,
and the Lucio drop the beat.
Yeah.
Actually, believe it or not, Lucio beat drop, you can farm ultimate off that, and Doomfist shields, you can farm ult off of that.
But
it's
not
only
Hammond?
Interesting.
Only Hammond. You can't farm ult off of them.
Interesting. Sounds like a deliberate decision from their part, though, so that he could go
or
in.
a bug.
Because you know when you hit Winston's shield or Reinhardt's shield, you don't farm ultimate off of them, right? So I wonder if they're trying to kind of like give him like an ability similar to those shields.
Yeah, like specifically coded for tanks.
It's really weird. For the longest time, I always thought that you couldn't farm ult off of beat drop or Doomfist, but yeah, I found out recently that you could.
Huh, well, we're learning more than Hammond today, boys and girls.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go into the minefield.
Before we move on to ultimate, I had a question about the adaptive shield. Can you activate it as you're pile driving down? Do you do it before you get the pile drive, or you do it after you pile drive? Like, what's the reasoning there?
It kind of depends on like the height of where I'm at. Like, if I'm capable of shielding right before I pile driver, I will. But sometimes you just don't get the opportunity to do that because you can't like animation cancel the cast time between shield and pile driver. Like, there's still like a split second.
They're
when you use your shield.
exclusive.
Yeah, it won't let you just combo it. So most of the time I pile driver then shield.
Is there any reason that you should wait to take damage before you take your adaptive shields, just so that your healers have something to heal through?
No, not at all. I just, somebody said that before, but I disagree with that philosophy. I think you shouldn't take damage before, because
you're feeding ult charge.
And you also like
you
chip off your armor, which your armor is pretty important when you engage.
Yeah, because the armor goes underneath of the adaptive shield, so you're benefiting from it.
Now, do you know what's the kind of like the range for adaptive shield to trigger it based on position of the enemy hero? Is it super close? Can you be like a little bit apart?
Um,
You need to be
there's
within 8 meters according to the wiki.
8 meters.
that's like Lucio Aura, right? I think 8 meters. No, it might be a little bit
It might
less.
be a little bit less, I think.
I think Lucio's 10. So
Yeah,
close.
I will look it up, but you guys can keep talking.
it's kind of generous horizontally, but vertically, like up and down, the adaptive shield hitbox is pretty bad. So that's why I won't combo shield into pile driver too much, because one, the
okay.
cast time, and also the hitbox is like not generous at all. So if you go too high,
Lucio's
it's gonna
12
get to you.
meters.
Really? Okay. Well, I was off.
Yeah. Well,
It's because they
a few
nerfed it
less.
like a bazillion times.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, horizontally that's not too bad. 8 meters still,
Yeah, it's still pretty
can
good.
take a bunch of people. Yeah.
Now, let's feel free to kind of bounce back and forth, because Hammond is like this. We described this internally with the rest of us was so Hammond is a symphony of abilities, not isolated incidents. Okay,
Mhm.
like this is very much similar to your Doomfists and your Genjis out there. You can't really have one ability without the others. And you could say that about pretty much every hero in Overwatch, but there are distinct heroes like Ashe or McCree or even Soldier that are what they call gun heroes, even Widowmaker and Hanzo, where the abilities are kind of complementary to the main function of the gun. And then there are other heroes that are more qualified as ability heroes, and Hammond is 100% one of those.
For sure.
So let's talk about Minefield, and then maybe we can bounce back and forth if this kind of brings up any other combinations with the other abilities.
Okay, so for Minefield, generally, I think the best way to go about using it is smack in the middle of the enemy team, and for various reasons. For one, you're most likely going to catch someone because that's in the middle, everyone's around there, and the minefield spreads outward. So, not too much of an opportunity to run. For second, because if you minefield and the enemy team decides to kite away from it, they'll probably split off into like two branches, which the front line and then the back line. And what that does is it zones the enemy team and basically splits them off into whatever it is, sections 3v3. And if you communicate with your team, you can tell them, hey, these guys, the Reinhardt's cut off. Let's just collapse on this dude. And you can go ahead and run him over, or you can knock him back into the minefield, whatever. But it gives you a pretty good opportunity to isolate the enemy team. On top of that, the way you want to go about using it is you want to chain your minefield with your pile driver. And the reason for that is when you minefield, the mines take a couple seconds to become active. They need to wait till they hit the ground. And then since you follow up with a pile driver, it gives them time to settle, and it knocks the enemy team up and suspends them in air, so they can't run from the minefield either. And that's kind of the basis of how you want to go about using minefield. You can also use it sometimes if the enemy team's like in close quarters inside a building. You can just run right through that minefield and block the gates. And there you go.
Right. You mentioned the little combo you do with pile driver and mines, and so far I think most people are aware of the combo. Executing the combo is a whole different story, though. Try to pull it off and not looking like a fool. It's gonna take a little bit of practice. But you're talking about basically jumping up in the air, using your mines, and then pile driving right afterwards, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I've tried
So
doing
it
that at
requires
home.
you to use your grappling hook or
it
getting
takes some
high
practice.
ground.
All right,
Yeah.
so super important, now that you mentioned it, I want to touch on. A lot of Hammond players, they don't set up in between fights. So say when you're on defense, I just keep thinking Eichenwald for some reason. We're on defense of Eichenwald. You just want to fight. A lot of Hammonds, they just chill. They just like stand at the gate and try to shoot the gate like they're Soldier 76. What I do is I go into that blue mini room above the where the what's it
The
called?
mini
The
health
bridge
pack
is?
is and the bridge.
Yeah, exactly. And you just stand above the bridge, and you can use your third-person view in ball mode to see like as the enemy team's crossing, and right when they're crossing the choke, right when they end up on your side, not their side. Don't go to their side ever, which people do. When they end up on your side, that's when you'd want to execute the minefield pile driver, because once they've passed the choke point, they're already committed. They can't just, oh yeah, we're gonna go back now, because they're already at like the most vulnerable spot in the game, which is a choke, when you have to funnel through and there's like all these angles the defending team has on you. So yeah, whenever they're funneling through the choke is when you'd want to use it, and you want to be set up. Super important.
Yeah, you already want to be in the position so that you can get to it almost immediately, right?
Exactly. Super important.
You mentioned a couple of things in here that I definitely want to talk about because they're a little bit more advanced Hammond stuff, but definitely a huge part of his kit. I love that you said you wait to the choke, then you pile drive. Earlier you mentioned how pile drive kind of drags heroes towards you a little bit. So not only are you setting up the mines, but you're also kind of like dragging them into the mines after you set them up, right?
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, that's huge. And also, let's touch on using the ball to use third person perspective because I think is one of the best features of his kit that you can constantly go into third person and you can scout around without actually being out in the open, right?
Yeah, that's another super important thing. If Sombra was in the game, Wrecking Ball would easily be like the best scouter in the game because you can look around corners and see where the enemy's at, and they don't know where you're at. So why scouting's super important on Wrecking Ball in particular is because when you know where they're going, let's think a map like Nepal Village. That's the one with the little inside building. Kind of hard to get like pile drivers on there. People usually run
Yep.
main. Anyways, they can go through main or they can go through top. And if you're scouting beforehand, you guys already won the objective. You have defender's advantage. If you're scouting, you could tell your team, hey, they're going top or hey, they're going main. And giving that information is super important because let's say you have like a slow healer like Zenyatta just chilling at top because he thinks they're going to go main. He doesn't know they're going main. Oh, they're all going to run him over. Goodbye, Zen. So it's super important to give this information to your team. That way they can reposition, be like, okay, we have defender's advantage. Let's use it. And like, pincer the enemy as they're trying to come through a choke. So yeah, you use third person to do that. Super important.
And Hammond kind of has like the perfect storm of abilities to be a scout as well because you can be away from your team. You can be in a position that for other heroes would be like way overcommitted or like just not even part of the fight. But with Hammond, it makes sense because one, you're like one of the fastest heroes in the games. You can bypass almost all obstacles. You can go vertical, you can go horizontal. So for you, it's really easy to kind of like go around the map, right? And you couple that with your ability to go with third person, and now you have a hero that can be kind of like omnipresent almost everywhere, right? You can be 1 second in this side of the map, and the next second you're on the other side of the map.
Yeah, for sure. And since he doesn't have like since he's a tank, it's not like he's gonna get one shot like a tracer would. You can go all the way to their spawn if you wanted to, the scout, and you wouldn't get punished for it as long as you're like you know when to get out. So
Right,
yeah,
you tag up
he's
with the
really
health
good.
packs on the way back, and you'll be full.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Nobody's hitting those health packs because you're so deep.
That's
He's
another
really
thing too.
self-reliant too.
Yeah, he's hard to burst, right? Like if he wants to, you can headshot him. He has the adaptive shield, and you can just go around looking for maps or for health packs around the map. So, like you said, he's super self-reliant in that
It's the
sense.
mini game.
Yeah.
Just playing
is-
Easter Bunny.
I feel like it's the reason why you can get away with playing him as a single tank, while with other tanks sometimes you can't get away with it, right? Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So like a lot of the things the pros like to run is like solo tank Hammond and maybe like quad DPS with a Mercy or something like that. And the
Mhm.
reason why they do Hammond instead of like Winston or Reinhardt is well, for first, let's start with Reinhardt. Reinhardt super slow, no mobility. The enemy team could just run over that Reinhardt because he's not going to get any support. You only have a Mercy for healing. He has no bubbles, no nothing. So Reinhardt out of the question for solo tank. Then you got the other main tank, Winston. Winston, the problem with Winston is he doesn't always have a shield. It's only when he deploys it once. So let's say he goes in for a dive and he shields, boom, both his cooldowns are gone. So if the enemy team decides to collapse on that Winston, they could. Hammond, on the other hand, if he goes in for a dive, he can just get right out. No problem. Adaptive shield out of there. The other tanks can't do that. So he's very good. He's the best escape artist, and he's arguably one of the tankiest.
Yeah, because before Wrecking Ball came out, the only reason that Winston was ever effective was alongside of heroes like D.Va, where you can kind of mitigate his cooldowns using another hero.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how initial dive existed. And now it kind of just went away because now it's just like, well, we can just double up on our damage by going 3, maybe even 4 damage heroes, and then running one tank that has all of the mobility and has no problems being sustainable, as well as having mobility and utility. Like, he brings all of those things to the package. He's got CC, he's got verticality, he's got speed, and he can scout even though he's non-DPS. Like, it's unreal how many options that you have within your team composition building with Hammond.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you indeed do, but it's not as easy to pull off. I feel like Hammond is one of those
No,
heroes that like
yeah.
you really gotta practice all those things because especially pulling off the pile drivers is not as easy as just pressing one button, right? You have
Sure.
to get good with the grapple, get good with getting air and positioning yourself in the right place, then timing it at the right time so you land on your target. It takes a lot of practice for Hammond, I feel.
High skill floor, high skill ceiling.
Yeah, for sure. I think
Basically.
like if you're not kind of okayish with his grapple is the most important thing. Like if you're not good with his grapple movement, you're gonna have a hard time on Hammond because his whole kit just revolves on being able to use his grapple properly. So it's a very big thing. But yeah, Hammond's like he's really good at being a solo fragger, sustaining for himself. But the fault with Hammond, unlike the other tanks, is that Hammond can't help his team. He doesn't have a bubble. He doesn't have a shield. He doesn't have anything to help his other teammates. So it's all about helping his team through quick engagements and distracting the enemy for the most part.
He sets the tempo.
I'm glad you brought that up because it makes sense why the compositions where Hammond really shines, everyone else is kind of self-reliant too, right? Like usually you run it with like a Sombra, a Soldier 76, a Mercy. You might put a Tracer in there. Genji sometimes because he needs a little bit more babysitting. But yeah, usually the heroes that you're running kind of like can fend for themselves, right? They don't need necessarily like a shield or somebody to kind of peel for them all the time.
Yeah, exactly. You won't see people running like a McCree, a Junkrat with a ball too often because it's like if they get dove, they don't really have a movement ability to run away, and Hammond's not going to really help them. I mean, you could try to peel with Hammond, but more often than not, it's not going to end up well.
He's not made for it. Not like a Brigida is, right?
The only way he could peel for his teammates is killing whoever's diving him. He can't actually like protect them in any way.
A reverse dive situation.
Offense is the best defense.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's I kind of wanted to go back a bit and talk about the minefield again because we have chat talking
here.
a lot going right now with regards to how minefield operates. So I'm going to explain that real quick and then you can talk about effectiveness. So basically like when you trigger minefield, all of the individuals like balls of the mines that pop out start at the center of where Wrecking Ball's hitbox is, at the very, very center. And then they kind of balloon out, almost like flower blossoming. Okay, that's kind of the same idea.
That's a beautiful
description,
Rob.
It almost looks like a firework, like a Roman candle, but it's going in all directions of from one point upwards, and then it'll go up and over with an arc. Okay, so if you're playing t-ball with your son out there, then that's kind of the idea, right? Like, they're not going to hit it very far, but it's kind of going to go up a little bit and then down. Okay, that's what the minefield will do in direction. Now, because of this, when you use minefield, if you are close, if your model is close to the ground, it's going to limit how far those things can kind of spread before they land and thus be active. So that's why Yeatle initially was talking about getting a decent spot where you can pile drive from in order to spread them out a bit more evenly and cover a larger zone so you can control it. Now, there are situations where you potentially could be in a niche where either A, you don't have a whole lot of space and you have to use it in that small area, or B, you're trying to like cut down a specific zone and you want to make sure that it's densely populated with like a no-no zone for the enemies. Go see Torbjorn ult use now, basically. And the other would be you want to spread it out even further by getting higher grounds plus your pile driver and your grappling hook. So Yeatle, I've kind of talked a little bit ad nauseum here, but why don't you talk about kind of more general purpose use or maybe some specific niches that you can kind of get clued into when you might want to use the different kinds.
So the close range one, like the really small one, is the one that you don't want to use too often, but when like a certain opportunity, say an enemy that's just clumped up in like a small room, I can't think of any small rooms right now, but just imagine
there's one on Rialto. There's lots of them.
Rialto.
Like the between point 2 and 3 in that like little
the spawn room
hotel.
for point 2?
Yeah. Or, well, I guess it would be a spawn room for point 1.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, okay, I get you. From point 2 to point 3. Yeah, so you can basically, like, do in those small buildings just to, like... Because in those small buildings, there's not much wiggle room. So if you minefield, it's gonna catch pretty much the whole area. That's one scenario. You don't want to use it like regularly. I guess you can also use that small minefield if you're on the payload in like an overtime scenario, because the enemy needs to touch the payload if they want to win the game. So that will cover the payload.
You're just locking it down.
But generally, the one that you want to go for the most is the medium range one, because you can always chain in the pile driver. Like the close range one, sometimes you won't be able to chain in the pile driver, and the pile driver is super important part of that. And when it's medium range, the mines aren't too spread like they are in long range. In long range, if they get too spread, one mine's not going to kill somebody. It won't even kill a tracer in one mine, because it does, I think, 130 damage. Tracer's 150. So you want them to like blow up a mine and then boop right into another mine. So medium range is as optimal as it gets for minefield.
Now, it does feel like there's a thing as a like too high, where you might be like too high to use your mines, where they might become like a little bit too inefficient, right?
Yeah. If you're like, I can't tell you the exact distance of what too high would be, but if it seems like it's high enough to where, like I said earlier, like they won't pop one mine and end up into the other one, then you probably shouldn't go for that. I think scenarios where you'd want to go for that is like if it's specifically just a zoning ult, like the dive tanks are way in. Let's think something like Volskaya defense point A, right? Let's imagine that the dive tanks are already, they flew over, they're on point, but the supports and everyone else are still like just barely trying to get past the choke. So you can go for a higher minefield there just for the purpose of keeping those supports and everyone else out the fight entirely. And that's when you kind of go for that. One specific use for minefield that like I came up with that I think is pretty cool is say the enemy team's just running a full dive comp, like Monkey, Diva, Genji, like just heroes that require a dive and very close range to be effective. And your team's running like some hit scans hero. So we'll think Horizon Lunar Colony, point B, you're on attack, you're setting up your hit scan on top right high ground. What you can do is you can minefield the top right and your hit scan have free reign. Like the enemy Monkey or Diva can't jump into your hit scan.
Almost like shielding them with your mines.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one really cool thing you can do with it.
Because you set up your widows that way?
You know, as long as they're alive, like things are gonna get done.
I wouldn't do it with Widowmakers. Widowmakers, they like to move a lot when they get dove. Like if a Winston jumps a Widowmaker and he loses like he's left to like half his health, the Widowmaker probably there's still a chance you'll lose that 1v1, but if Winston jumps into that Kree, he's dead, or the soldier, he's dead for sure.
Gotcha.
And you said Hammond can't peel.
Yeah, he can feel that way. He can feel that way. That's one way. Another time where you can use it is like, let's say another 2CP map, Temple of Anubis, point B. You're on attack. The goal is you want to get your supports to that bridge point on point B. You know what I mean? Right above the mega.
Yep.
So you can use your minefield if in the specific scenario that they're running those dive DPS and dive heroes, you can use your minefield just to secure your healer that they can't get dove or anything. They're super safe on the bridge. Because if you can get all 6 heroes alive on the point and your healer just safe and sound on that bridge, you pretty much won 2CP.
Is there any scenarios where you would set up a minefield almost where the enemy team should be before they get there, and then kind of make a route around and knock them into it using the fireball?
So one thing I like to do is on go back to Horizon point B again. On attack, let's say we got a couple picks in. I like to use my minefield on their left spawn door. Like, you know where the boxes are to that left door?
Yeah, by the forklift.
Say we're on attack. Forklift? Is forklift on attack?
Or is the forklift on the right side?
I don't remember. You're on attack. You're looking from the attack perspective, and it's the left spawn door.
Okay, then no, yeah. The forklift's on the right side by the mega.
I like to use my minefield right on top of those boxes on the left side, because people always like to go through that spawn door. And I don't know why. In GM, all the time, people just walk through the spawn door and they end up walking right into the mines. Every time, pretty consistently. Like, I haven't been let down too often by that minefield. So, yeah, I like place that minefield towards their pathing to, like, if they see those mines, they have 2 options. We're going to kill the mines, die of the mines, or go the other way, which is great for you, because It's basically
All
like
of
they
the
died
options
again.
are good.
You can do the same thing on Hanamura Point B, where you minefield the right doorway. I use that one as well. And that one pretty successful also.
Yeah,
Nice.
I can see that.
I kind of wanted to do like some rapid fire questions to kind of like finish off our Hammond discussion over here.
Sure.
Just quickly, for people who are trying to get into the hero, what do you think are the most important things to learn about his kid so you can have a functional Hammond without getting like fancy, crazy pile driver mines and some of the fancier things? What do you think are like the core of being a good Hammond?
Like I said earlier, it's super important that you practice your grapples. Like really just hop in the quick play, make a second account, Q comp, something, put yourself in a pressure environment to like try different grapples. Don't watch rollout videos. Rollouts are overrated. I have one video on rollouts. Those are the only good ones. But don't look too much into like rollouts or anything like that. Don't try to get fancy with it. It's all about just like naturally being like, yeah, I'm gonna grapple that. Boom, go for it. And
being
for the
very
most part,
fluid with them,
grapples.
right? Like you want to be with Hammond, you want to be fast almost. You never want to be static. It feels like.
Yeah, for sure. Don't hang around for too long.
Download all the Mario Kart Hammond stuff in the workshops and they come out and just practice your movement.
Mario Kart Hammond? Oh, the
yeah,
Hammond
there's
races.
a couple things that people have been doing that with the
Oh,
Hammond
for the
races.
workshop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't played this yet. I want to.
They look fun.
Cool.
You're going to clean house when it comes out, man.
Actually, that might not be like a
Bad.
bad way to practice your grapples. It could be like a fun way to kind of like go around the map and.
It won't get you used to the cooldowns because it's always like
infinite.
Oh, okay, but it gets you used to
if you
want to
make a limited version, then yeah, it could help you.
Yeah.
Alrighty. What about map dependent? Is Wrecking Ball map dependent, or can you use it almost anywhere?
Sorry, I wanted to touch on one thing.
Oh, sure.
Right before that. For like general for new Wrecking Ball players, when you don't know what to do, like I said, there's options. Always go through the checklist. You can either contest point, roll through the enemy, or dive. Always remember that. Super important. That way you know what you're doing all the time.
Or wait for cooldowns.
Yeah, and wait for cooldowns.
Yeah.
All right, what was the question? Sorry.
No worries. That's great. Yeah, that's good to know for new players. Is Wrecking Ball map dependent?
Partially. I don't think he's as map dependent as people are making it out to be. I think for sure if you're like on defense of a 2CP map, having Hammond on the first point can be rough because the enemy team just presses tab. Oh, they have a Hammond? Okay, let's whip out Sombra, May. Let's do the whole 9 yards real quick. So first point defense, I wouldn't do it. But I think like on a second point defense, on escort, especially on Koth, he's really good. I think on Koth, there's like no reason not to be running Hammond right now because the advantage of Hammond is he's the fastest hero in the game, and he's so fast that he can make it to the enemy's choke first fight before they can. And that just like sets you up already. It's like you have defender's advantage first fight. So I think there's no reason not to run Hammond on Koth.
He does seem more comp dependent than he is map dependent, right? Like you can get away with Hammond almost in any map as long as your composition is not like relying on a shield, for example, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like, let's think you're playing on Junkertown. The enemy team's running Bunker, Bastion, the whole pirate ship thing. Like they're running a whole entire comp just to play around their hero. And if you're Hammond and then the rest of the heroes on your team are just shield break, you don't have a shield or anything, it's going to be hard to get much done because the goals of the heroes don't like line up. Like one hero wants to break shield, the other hero wants to dive
and avoid the shield at all costs.
Yeah, that's where the problems come with Hammond.
Yeah.
So I got a couple more questions too. Let's talk about heroes. So the first one would be, who are your public enemies? Who you're avoiding? What sucks to play against this Hammond, and how you deal with it?
Public enemies. Everyone already knows Sombra, dude. Sombra's terrible.
Hammond's natural predator.
Not fun to play against at all. Infinite stealth, so you never know where she's at, and hack comes back pretty fast. You cancel the hack, 2-second cooldown, boom, back already. Not a fun hero to play against. People always ask me, how do you play against Sombra? I think really the only thing I can say really is just keep track of where she's at, and if you don't know where she's at, then you gotta be really quick and snappy with your engagements. Like you see the enemy team,
first.
Yeah, you see the enemy team, you don't see the Sombra, roll through them real quick. Don't pile driver. If you pile driver, it gives her time to de-stealth and hack you. Just roll right through them, get out immediately, and then she'll probably de-stealth. And when you know where she's at, it gets a little bit easier to deal with her.
Yeah,
But
play really safe. And the thing about it is, honestly, if you're playing against somebody that is on point, she might just shut you down. I feel like, because I've done that to Hammonds before. Sombra is one of my favorite heroes, and if you're on top of them and they're like not the best Hammond out there, like you can really just outright shut them down, where they have to swap because they can't do anything.
Yes, Sombra is super tilting sometimes. Like I had this one clip where we were on Dorado defense. The game just started, so they were just coming out the gate. I waited on one of the roofs for 20 seconds, exactly 20 seconds, and then I pile driver all the way in their backline, like near the spawn door. A Sombra de-stealth hacks me. There goes first fight.
Now,
So.
there's some other things that we would consider maybe as a soft counter, or something that is relatively good against you, but not in every situation, similar to what Sombra can be. But in these situations, soft counters get to be much more polarizing when you're running a Hammond and you're not at like an upper echelon of skill tier, especially with how high the ceiling and how high the floor is with skill for usability on Wrecking Ball. So can you talk a little bit more about heroes like, I don't know, trying to think of things like May. I think May was brought up in chat. McCree's stun. There's even just something simple like an honest sleep dart on Hammonds that aren't really good at their movement yet can be really, really aggravating for a lot of early tier players. How would you say you can kind of get over these things, or kind of know how to adjust to them?
Yeah, so the main thing is just kind of like choosing your fights. I think the May example, a lot of people think May is like a hard counter, but I don't think so. I think it's really similar to like Reaper, for example. Just stay out of their effective range. That's all you got to do. It sounds like a forehead answer because it is. You just need to stay out of the range. Like May's in about melee range a little bit more for her freeze. So as long as you're not pile driving right next to her, you should be fine. You can roll through her and stuff like that, and she won't be able to freeze you in time. As long as you always come unexpected, she won't be able to freeze you. Like, take a high ground, go behind them, roll them, whatnot. If she gets the freeze off, like, preemptively, then it's going to stop your momentum, and you're donezo. But, yeah, just stay out of her range for the most part. For honors that are landing a lot of sleeps, it's, like I said, it's kind of like picking your engagements. Like, there's a time where it's worth trading that sleep dart for the engagement, like to get it out. But there's also times where it's not. So, for example, you don't want to be caught in a 1v6 scenario where you go back, dive the Ana, get slapped, everyone just collapses on you. You want to do it like mid-fight when she's trying to heal, just to kind of zone her. You can also like chip some damage off of her. That way she has to like use her nade earlier. If she uses her nade on you, that's a really big plus. If she has to use sleep dart and nade, that's really good, because that means your team could just like collapse on this poor defensive old lady pretty easily. So
kill the grandma.
You make it sound so rough like that. Collapse on the old lady.
Get her before she gets the beach ball.
Bye, grandma.
I was gonna say, with Hammond, I think a big part of learning how to play Hammond is learning how to play around those abilities that are gonna mess with your day. And I'm glad that you mentioned it. You just have to keep them in mind, right? Like if you're gonna dive the whole 6 enemy team, and you're by yourself, hopefully make sure that the Anan sleep dart is down, or the McCree flashbang is not there, right? Because like those are the things that could mess up your day and mess up your escape, right? Like there's nothing worse than a Hammond pile driving. Then you try to do a quick grapple out of there, and you just get flashbang, right? And like there goes your grapple, and they can just burst you down really easy. So just keep those in mind, right? And play around those abilities. Don't just blindly dive into it, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's super important about keeping track of it and knowing when tanking that ability is like the optimal play. Like let's say there's a Korea all the way by himself. You go in, you pile driver, you get stunned, but you're not going to get focused. Like the enemy team's not going to collapse on you. It's kind of like a game sense and awareness of when you're going to get punished and when you're not. So you go in for that 1v1 on the Kree. Maybe you can't take it because you get low, but someone else can collapse on it because now he doesn't have his stun. Maybe your Genji wants to blade now. Nice. They don't have sleep. They don't have stun. This is my time to shine. Genji's going to get play of the game.
There you go. And that's kind of how you main tank with Hammond. You kind of like demand the attention, the abilities to be thrown on you. But Hammond is the hero that can withstand that. As long as you're playing it properly and intelligently, you can really soak all of those abilities and damage to yourself and still come out alive.
Yeah, sure.
Now let's flip the ticket, and I want you to talk a little bit more about your public enemies. What are you targeting? Who are you going for? What are your best targets? Of course, I believe in pretty much any sense of a hero that could be labeled as dive, Zenyatta is almost always going to be number one. So
Yeah.
besides Zenyatta, who else are you going after?
So yeah, if Senyatta doesn't have like any help, he's public enemy number one, or the first person you want to kill. But most important, a lot of people don't focus on this as Hammond, is the hit scan DPS, primarily speaking the Widowmaker. You have the speed, you have the health, and you have the damage to just solo this Widowmaker or effectively take her out of a fight. And that's one way of compensating for your team not having a shield. So let's say you're on attack and your team needs to cross this choke, but that Widowmaker's just eyeing the choke, so they can't. The way you go about solve you is you dive the Widowmaker, and in that time, she's not going to land any headshots unless it's on you. And not even, because you're probably in ball form. So,
Right.
number one, you get that Widowmaker, you always focus her. Don't leave it up to your teammate every single time. Let's say Hanamura defense, 2 CP, you're in a recontest scenario, your job's to get that Widowmaker, nobody else. So, Widowmaker's number one. A soldier on high ground, just get out his abilities and whatnot, his heal station, like bait out abilities. That's important too. But
And
yeah, the hit scan.
This has happened to me before, and it's the worst feeling when you're like aimed in with your Widowmaker and just killing people, and then out of nowhere, a pile driving Hammond like drops on you, and there's nothing you can do. You just died right there. You're like, whoa, what is happening? Because
The worst is when you know it's coming and you're just hearing the rumblies. You're like, oh God, I don't know where it is, but it's coming.
No, I
Oh,
like
no,
when
it's
I
coming.
like when I hear the rumblies, because at least I know like, oh, this guy is coming over here. It's worse when he's just flying midair and you can't even hear him.
Yeah. Like if you can get a pile driver off on the Widowmaker and she doesn't get healed immediately, it's pretty easy to line up those headshots. Like
Mhm.
it's in your favor. So the Widowmaker, they just need to be more conscious of where you're at all times. It's kind of like the Sombra matchup. Except it's a little bit more in favor of Widowmaker because Hammond doesn't have infinite stealth, so there's that.
There's a little PJ Salt mixed in there. You guys have to have fun with though.
Alrighty. Do you have any other questions, Rob? I think that kind of was a pretty good, well-rounded discussion.
I mean, Yeatle, if you have any other like kind of things that you would like to mix in here that we didn't ask you, or that you're just like, don't forget this, then yeah, you have the floor, and we can probably close out the show there.
No, I think you guys
Watch
did
your
a
stream.
good job of watch my stream, twitch.tv/Yeatle. Got a lot of stuff to learn there. But yeah, I think you guys did a great job of covering everything for the most part. So we got nothing.
Awesome.
All right, great. Let's wrap up the shop by thanking a few people over at Patreon. Patreon.com/OmnicLab is the best way to support the show and do it financially. It helps us keep updating our equipment, maintaining equipment as they break, as well as maintain our website costs, our new fees with hosting for the podcast feed, as well as any and all domain names and stuff like that. Furthermore, it is a great way that you can just support your favorite creators in general. If they're not even at Omnic Lab, you can support other creators in a similar way. So our top level sponsors over there at the diamond level is Top Score Solutions, Shazir, Shepard, Crimson Fail, Brendan D, Refire, Roger B, Krista Playa, and Tragic Zach. There are no new patrons this month, but it is just another reminder at the bottom of the show to sign up for $250 patronage because we are doing coaching still. Andres had another session this last week, as well as me, and I will have another one coming up this week with another player, and we've just been having a blast doing them. It's really good for us because it helps us kind of condense down our hour-long, long-winded nature to a 1-hour session and trying to be not like shouting in your ears the whole time. So we're trying to help practice our coaching styles and maintaining that so that they're more individualized, as well as improving ourselves as coaches. So we really appreciate that on our end, as well as helping out our community.
Yeah, so far it's been super great. I've really been enjoying all the coaching sessions. I had 2 this week already, and I have 1 later today. It seems like you guys have been enjoying them so far. So if you're a patron that has signed up for coaching sessions, thank you very much for supporting us and for, signing up for this. It's been a great learning adventure for me, and so far I think you guys have gotten something out of it. If you haven't signed up for the coaching session and you're a Patreon at the $2.50 tier, do so because they're super super cool. So far we've had a great time, and everyone has gotten something out of it. So I expect
And you can choose
there.
your coach, so you can get Andres or myself, or try to best of both worlds month to month.
That's
It's
right.
up to you. In addition, Twitch has the affiliate program that we are a part of. You guys can support us over at twitch.tv/OmnicLab, and you can also toss your Amazon Prime/Twitch Prime subs that way to our good friend Yeatle over at twitch.tv/Yeatle, Yeatle. And go check him out there and subscribe to his content. I'm sure that you've got YouTube guides as well going, and we'll give you the floor to promote your stuff, Yeatle.
Yeah, same thing. Just Yeatle on YouTube. You can find me easily. YouTube.com/Yeatle. I've got a lot of Hammond guides, some off-tank stuff, and some other stuff
How
coming
do you
on the
spell
way.
your name just for people listening right now?
Yeatle, Yeatle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeatle with the A.
Yeah, so please go check out his content. You can also contact him on Twitter. I'm sure he's got other resources on his About section. So just go check him out there. We'll try to provide any and all show notes links for you, and tag him in all of the locations in our Discord and in our Twitter updates. Thank you guys for listening to episode 151. Andres, where can people find you?
If you want to find me, you can do so over on Twitter at iPlayGames. You spell that IPLAI Games.
If you want to find me, I'm under the tag NotRob, NOTROB, and on my Twitch is NotRobMay with my last name. And if you guys want to do anything and hang out, I'm probably gonna have the day off this week, so I might actually jump in and do some streaming. And if you want to talk some Dungeons and Dragons, I just made a new subclass for Warlock, and I'm playtesting it this week. So if you guys want to take a look at that and give me some feedback, I really appreciate it. You want to find anything Omnic Lab, go check out the website, omniclab.com/links. You can find everything about the show there. And with that, we'll be signing off here. Remember, don't be a lab rat, be a scientist. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks again to Yeatle for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks to everyone in the chat, too. You guys were pretty active today. We got a lot of Hammond fans.
I'm going to spam my only Hammond emote.
A bunch from Overwatch League, actually.
I have nothing more to teach you. The rest you must learn for yourself. Walk in harmony, my student.
Bye, guys. This will be up on YouTube as well. See you guys. I love your gone mad emote, Yeatle. It's hilarious.
Yeah. I was gonna remove it at one point, but the